Okay, I'd like to open the February 21st Planning Board meeting. We are being video recorded and audio recorded. First up would be administrative items. Solar 88-1 LLC, file number 18-001, 011 SP, endorsed Form G for performance surety?
Yes, so, Westport Route 88 Solar One LLC, they have given us the funds that they agreed to and returned their Form G, so we just need endorsement.
Okay, so we don't need to vote on that.
No, it's already voted on.
And while we're doing that, next would be 0 Brookwood Drive, file number 19-005 SP, endorsed Form G once more.
Yep, so same thing, just for Brookwood on Main Street.
Okay. Should I borrow your pen? I brought a pencil instead. Should I borrow your pen? And while we're finishing that up, we have, the next up is 533 Horse Neck Road, file number 23-001A. KSP Law has informed us that our decision has been appealed. This was an A&R with 4 lots, and the appeal suggests that we should have declined to endorse and declared it a subdivision. So we're waiting to hear back from town council on what the outcome of that shall be. I don't know if anybody has any questions about that. Okay.
Maybe Ms. Meyer could get the proper spelling of all the members of the planning board. Correct.
And we're not a planning commission,
Yeah.
so I think this is a problem with the attorney, so it would be, I think, appropriate to have everything correct. We're just waiting for town council. Do you know when we're gonna hear from them?
I'm not sure, I can check with, Jim.
Okay,
Jim just sent it to town council on Friday.
right. So maybe by next meeting, we'll
Hopefully.
have some kind of news. Next up would be approval not required, A&R for 484 Sanford Road, file number 23-007A. It is a request by the applicant for endorsement of a plan of land showing 3 lots for land locating at 484 Sanford Road, map 23A, lot 397-398.
Mr. Quentin is here as a representative for this, but I'll pretty much give the lowdown on it.
Okay,
So what you're seeing on the screen is that yellow shaded piece of property right now belongs to 484 Sanford Road. And what they're proposing is to subdivide that piece of land and just give it to the property on D Drive, which is Mr. and Mrs. Viveris. That that is located right here. So they're gonna take it from here, subdivide it, and then give it to that piece of property, which is not a buildable lot, but just used for a larger backyard area.
so it'll be combined, the 14,000 square feet will be combined with the 19,000 square feet.
Yes, so it still won't make it 60,000 square feet, but it'll make it, I believe, 42.
34, 231. When you combine them.
And it's leaving the one on 484 Sanford Road, still at 66,854 square feet.
Sir, for the record, could you identify yourself?
Alan Quinton, professional land surveyor.
Okay,
So they're giving it to this property here?
Yes.
Got it.
Yeah, number 38 D Drive.
A gift, or
What's that?
is it free?
No.
It said giving it.
Well,
Selling.
I'm gonna be in next to it
Yeah, that,
if it
that
gets
doesn't
approved.
make any difference what the disposition is to us, but,
no.
No, I don't think it's free. It's
So, planners, can you give us your recommendation?
I would recommend that this be endorsed by the planning board.
And it says on here somewhere that this is not a buildable lot?
It does on the plan, yes. I don't know if you guys have the actual plan. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, it's right here. It does in the top left-hand corner.
Okay. Just for the record, it shows no access, yet I believe that it does qualify for a Form A, or A&R approval not required.
I agree with that, Mr. Chairman. Once the plan is, it's clearly endorsed, the plan is clearly labeled not a building lot.
Yep.
It also has the intent to attach it to the adjacent property.
Yep.
And the remainder parcel is 66,000.
Okay, so any more comments? If not, I would entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair, I move that we approve the petition for 484 Sanford Road, 23-007A, for approval not required.
I second that.
Any more comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And I believe that one of the planners can sign that for you tomorrow.
You told me when it's ready, where to pick it up.
Tomorrow, anytime after 8 a.m.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Next up would be the assistant planner's report.
What's that?
Oh, no, just,
Oh,
We're just going on.
I mean, you're welcome to stay and listen to the assistant planner's report if you want to.
I'd like to.
okay, so for my report, I just have that Ironwood Renewables, that was in litigation and was a decision that we made in the spring of last year. It was appealed, but the judgment to dismiss the appeal happened on February 13th, and the plaintiffs have 30 days to appeal that judgment. For the harbor water study, I reached out to Frank again last week. He should be providing an update for me sometime this week. For Maya Way, the 45-day deadline for the applicant to reply to the letter that I sent him is expiring on Friday, so I haven't heard from the applicant. So the next step that I would probably put on the March 7th agenda is for the board to vote that a letter to the Board of Selectmen be sent asking them to have the highway department take the surety amount for $87,000 plus additional interest and use it to fix the road from my way. And then for the thin layer deposition that we had a meeting, gathering on last week, you asked me to find which salt marshes are owned by who. So I did do that. These are the ones that I could find to my best ability. I did reach out to the assessor's office, and they said that some of them, they don't know their specific location, and therefore on the GIS map, the owners of the salt marshes are unknown. So those are the ones that I can find. The smaller ones are the ones that are not labeled on the GIS. You just can't click on them. They don't give you any information. You can't even, they don't have a parcel ID, so.
I think this is great, but I think these are ones with upland. So what we need to go back to the assessors and with a map and show them GIS pictures of various marsh that has no uplands. There's quite a few of them. And what Joe Costa says is that they were previously owned by people. And the assessors may have dropped it when there was nobody to send a dunning notice to. I don't know if the town ever really took possession of them, or they're just hanging out there in limbo. And we're gonna need to know, and it may take some investigation at the Registry of Deeds to try to figure this out. And I think you're gonna need some help trying to figure out how to do that. But we won't be able to get a permit to do anything on any marsh unless we can prove who owns it, is what, as you know,
Yeah.
what Joe said. And I think those, if you look at those, you can find some of those by name on old charts, old mariners charts. And by the ownership, I believe that the ones that I see, St. Alban, Hugh Morton, all of those have some uplands that either have had a duck hunting shack on them or something like that. But the ones that I'm talking about there's nothing on them, there's no upland, they're just marsh.
Okay.
And they could be all broken up into pieces, and they could have been one thing at the original time. So, I don't know how we do that, but you gotta figure it out.
Okay. We'll figure it out. All right.
But thank you for doing that, I think that's
There's
helpful.
some very large marsh islands in the lower part of the East Branch between our houses. There's, I don't, other than in a couple of cases, there are very big rocks that stick up out of them. Outside of that, they're submerged at high tide, or mostly submerged at high tide.
Today, they'd be totally submerged.
Yes.
But, you know, I've looked at these marshes for a long time, and I know that there were duck hunting platforms, shacks. Some of them had a little cabin on them.
I think one still does,
One still does.
or at least it's showing up.
There's two
These
big
systems.
ones there. One's attached to the land by a marsh, and that's the one owned by St. Alban. And then the one that's in front of the apartments, but removed, it's not connected to the land, that's owned by Cox. And
Yes.
she bought that specifically a few years ago. But the other ones are just, there's a couple of little ones south of that that I think have upland, and I think those are the ones that they're talking about, Dumpling and Little Dumpling and stuff like that. And Judy Islands on the east side of the West Branch.
Yep, I think I have Judy Allen on here
Yeah, it's on there.
somewhere. Yep. Okay, that's what I had for my report, so. All you.
Amy, do you have a printed copy of that report?
I do. I can also email it to whoever wants it.
Thank you.
Okay, so we are
Everybody
still
get-
waiting for our 2023 annual town meeting zoning revisions feedback from town council. Our next Route 6 rezoning meeting, I believe that was going to be next week, and there are some scheduling conflicts, so that was moved to March 1st. Last week, we met to discuss our application to the Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Program grant, for which I've prepared a support letter. The board does not have to motion for this letter. We already did it, I think 2 meetings ago. So I prepared that for Jim's signature. What we discussed in our meeting last week was to get the project more oriented around a defined deliverable. That deliverable will be creating a climate resilience plan, and we'd be applying to use grant funds for planning services and public engagement activities. And we are meeting with Courtney Roca next week on the 28th to get feedback on some of our grant materials.
Okay, so do you want me to read this for the record?
You can if you want to. It wouldn't hurt.
Okay, it's subject Westport MVP application support letter, Planning Board. The Westport Planning Board submits this letter to support the Westport Climate Resilience Committee, CRC, application to the Massachusetts Municipal Vulnerability Action Grant Program. The Planning Board is a close CRC partner with multiple members participating on the CRC. The CRC's proposal will bring necessary resources to support developing a climate resilience plan, the committee's priority initiative. The town would contract a climate resilience coordinator who would be responsible for community education and collaboration in drafting the town's climate resilience plan over a 2-year timeframe. It is essential for the town's long-term sustainability that policy interventions, adaptations, and mitigation approaches are prioritized for a well-managed response to climate change's impacts. Similarly positioned communities in the region, many of whom do not have an active climate resilience committee or resilience plan, will be able to use Westport's CRC approach to climate resilience planning as a model. Thank you for your consideration.
That's a great letter.
Or your pen. Sorry for the interruption.
No, that's okay.
Mr. Chair, I happened to read the support letter from the Buzzards Bay Coalition, which mentioned that the town of Westport is the only town in the Buzzards Bay watershed that is so far undertaking a plan like this, and it stressed the value of Westport's effort to other towns that may in the future embark on this, and that's consistent with what's in that letter. And I think that adds weight to our application for funding.
Yeah, New Bedford has a similar initiative,
Yeah.
but I don't know if it seems like it's going to be a little, well, from looking at the project website, it looks like it's a little bit more top-down with it being
Right.
initiated through a department and working through the planning process that way, as opposed to starting from a committee level and working with volunteers.
But I think of them as a little bit different category
Sure.
because they're, a bigger city with
Right.
a lot more resources.
But yeah, also on the same note, I don't believe any of the communities in the Buzzards Bay watershed have a climate resilience plan as well.
Right.
All right, next I have an update on open meeting law. Just so you all know, the temporary provisions allowing remote meetings will expire on March 31st. I did send a letter to Senator Rodriguez, Representative Schmidt, and the governor's office, just asking that they advocate to continue remote meetings. But unless you hear otherwise, please let other committees know that this will expire at the end of March.
Could I make one other comment? And that is that, speaking just for the Climate Resilience Committee, Westport is a town that has a number of summer residents who still have a stake in the town. They have an investment in the town. And meeting remotely is one way that you get people who don't live here in the winter to be able to participate in town affairs. And so I don't know if that argument was made when you contacted our representatives, but it certainly does allow people who might not be here in the winter to participate in town affairs.
Yeah, I also told them in my letter that it helps facilitate participation for folks who might have mobility impairments, working families, families with children. You know, that flexibility is something that I think it should remain in place because it helps people get involved in local government.
Yep.
I don't know if this is true, but when we were listening to NPR WGBH last week, I wasn't paying attention, but my wife said, I think they just extended that the governor just extended that one this past week. But
Okay, I'll have to
Oh,
check.
wow.
I don't know if that's true.
Okay, and then lastly, this is kind of, I'm gonna add one in here too, and it dovetails with the next one, the Main Road Streetscape Improvement Plan. So today we got we got feedback from the One Stop program, so those are the folks who they were reviewing expressions of interest to the Department of Housing and Community Developments, different grant programs. Obviously the big one is the MassWorks program for Route 6 sewer. And so the feedback, I've emailed that feedback off to all of you for your viewing. But looking forward towards some of these projects, I'm trying to develop some of the project materials for the Main Road Streetscape Improvement Plan. And I'm working through developing a stakeholder engagement strategy for engaging some residents, but more importantly, the businesses in the area. That was a major concern with the sidewalks when this was brought about the last time, was interruptions to business activities. So as a part of that, I would like to ask you all if you know anyone between Hicksbridge Road and Westport Commons who owns a business and might be interested in participating in a work group for the project. Obviously, we don't have any grant funds secured or anything like that, but just trying to plan ahead a little bit to keep some people in mind.
Okay, I think privately we'll tell you.
Okay. And that's all I have.
Okay, correspondence?
Well, you want invoices first, Mr. Chair?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry.
You want a motion on that?
Yes, please.
I would move, as I did last meeting, I think, that we approve the bill for the zoning bylaw amendments, the second bill for zoning bylaw amendments of $246 for East Bay Media Group for the legal ad for the zoning bylaws.
Second?
All those in favor? Aye.
And then, Mr. Chair, the second bill, I would move approval of a bill to WB Mason for $76.94 for computer supplies for the town planner.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
And in the, on the iPad, we have several smaller invoices for East Bay.
So those are for public hearings that are upcoming, so I'm not sure why they're in the packet. The applicants pay for
Okay.
their public hearing notices, so those aren't on the board.
All right. Correspondence?
I don't think we have any correspondence.
Okay. Minutes from the last meeting?
Mr. Chair, I've read the minutes. I would like to make a correction. And it's not a correction on the minutes because the minutes were accurate. It's a correction of what I said. If that's possible, I had a brain cramp when I called the committee I chair the Community Resilient Committee when it should be Climate Resilient Committee. I think that's on the last page. I found it once. Need to find it again. So it should,
Yeah, it's on the last page.
on the
number
last
7.
page. And also related to that, on item 7, I suggested we form a subcommittee of the Climate Resilience Committee. I think that should be made clear. Forming a subcommittee of the CRC. And then 2 lines after that, instead of saying Community Resilience Committee, it should say Climate Resilience Committee, so the chair doesn't look quite so stupid. If you would indulge that retroactive correction.
I certainly would.
Yeah. And I agree with that. As a matter of fact, we got the motion right. The motion was Climate Resilient Committee.
So, yeah, that's right. So, with that, I would move that we approve the minutes of February 7th.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Short, long-term planning, that's kind of a catch-all. John, you were at the thin layer deposition meeting we had with Joe Costa.
Yeah.
Would you give us just a little synopsis of why we met and what we're talking about?
Yeah, well, the subject is how do we protect marsh islands or marshes in general, but from sea level rise, because marshes tend to increase in elevation, but not as fast as sea level rise. So if you play that out, we're going to lose all the marsh islands in the Westport River eventually. And one way to adapt to that is what they allow in Rhode Island but don't allow in Massachusetts, which is thin layer deposition. That is, you put soil on the marshes. So we asked Joe Costa, who's been doing this, I think, a little longer than we've had marshes in the Westport River. He's really a tremendous resource to everyone in Buzzards Bay, and knows an awful lot, cares an awful lot. and has been helpful to Westport among all the other towns in the watershed for many, many decades. And so Joe Costa met with a few of us to tell us where the policy came from, what's involved in changing the policy, and ask some very good questions, like, do you guys have $1 trillion in your bank account because thin layer deposition is really expensive? And so if you're going to think about ways to adapt the environment, because there are all kinds of adaptations that Westport should be thinking about, this is a really expensive one. And so when one of us asked him, you know, so does it work? You know, what's the track record in Rhode Island? He said, well, I don't work in Rhode Island. I don't really know, but that's a good question. You should really try and find out the answer to that. But I do know it's really expensive. And so since after that, and he gave us some places to go find further information, which Michael went and dug through a little bit. But the end result was we don't have $1 trillion. I was shocked to find out that, you know, so I thought maybe Jim Hartnett might have said, oh, you know, look at that. We did. You know, the apothecary sold a winning ticket to some town employee, and we got it somewhere. But we don't, and that it is expensive, and this may not be something that is worth an awful lot of time, because it is an expensive way to go about saving margin. Manny, you had a question.
What type of material do they use?
Well, that's a simple question with a complicated answer, because it depends on where the marsh is. And Joe Costa said usually it's done in conjunction with dredging, so that if you're doing a dredging project and you're getting the right kind of dredge material, then you have to figure out what you do with the dredge material, and it becomes the answer to what you do with the dredge material. You deposit it on marshes if it's the right kind of material, and it's a byproduct of your dredge project, and that's how you save money. So if you've got a dredging project anyway, and you're dredging the right kind of material, then you can afford it.
And you need a home to get rid of it.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm just wondering if they do it because, like, you know, they apply sand to cranberry bogs.
Exactly.
So, and you do that when you have ice, so
Yep.
no.
And you need ice to do it.
But I'm sure they have some equipment that they're using, since we don't have the winters that are as cold as they used to be, to get it out there.
Yeah,
Probably
But
some-
you use ice on
Right,
top
that's
of
right,
water
yeah.
to get a thin layer. But on marsh, you've got grass, and, you know, it's a different way of doing it.
So it can be dredge material, and there's two ways to apply it. One is with excavators and bulldozers that are adapted for the marsh environment with big fat tires and stuff like
They have big flat treads.
that. And the other way is to get it into a slurry and squirt it up in the air like with a fire hose and let it come down. And I think that Rhode Island has done both. They've done a big thing along the east coast of Narragansett Bay, maybe in Tiverton, I'm not sure where, that used the excavation part. And the real trick is to be able to control the thickness, because if you get too much, you're gonna kill the grass. If you get too little, it's just gonna wash away. So, there are all kinds of ways to do it, but I think it was a very interesting meeting. It was a little exasperating for me,
Yeah.
because he talked about, $1 million for a marsh, and that we've been losing marshes for 400 years. But I've talked with Roberta from the Watershed Alliance to see if she could give me an example of an estuary that is healthy without any marshes. And I don't know if she's going to be able to find out that information, but the thing is that Westport has 23% of the estuarine shoreline of the whole of Buzzards Bay. That's a huge percentage. East of here, there's a lot of marshes that come up to land that isn't too far elevated from the marsh. But here, most of it is steep. So it's not gonna,
They can't retreat.
it can't retreat. I mean, either like on River Road, we have a road, or if you get beyond the road, it's a steep bank. And there's a little bit of space up in Adamsville where there's a couple of fields that come down to the river, and there's a couple of places on the East Branch where the fields are not too steep coming down. But maybe 3%, maybe 5% of the marshes in Westport could migrate. So, if we're gonna be spending $80 million and trying to fix the nitrogen problem in the river by doing sewering and everything else we're gonna do, or maybe it's 100 million, or maybe it's 120 million. And then you're gonna have an estuary is dead anyway because there's no marshes. What sense does that make? I mean, when you say it's $1 million is too expensive for a marsh, we're already committing to spend probably $100 million anyway on trying to get the nitrogen out of the river. And Joe said, well, you got a point there, but I don't think it carried the day. But
I mean, from just what I'm hearing too, I mean, don't we have an issue at the entrance to the river where they need to do some dredging?
we do.
Look into whether that material is good enough.
But right now, DEP does not allow it because their regulations were generated in time when people were filling in marshes. So there's rules against putting anything on a marsh. So I think they're at the point where they would allow it now. But then we have to, as Joe Costa said, we have to figure out who owns the marsh? Who owns which marsh?
They have to
And when they
change
allow it.
You have to change the wetland regulations.
Right. You have to go to, before Concom, the DEP's got to approve that, they got to approve being able to put something on the thing. It's crazy. My cousin is a environmental engineer that has done this in the Chesapeake Bay and done it in Rhode Island and has done marsh restoration in Dartmouth, but not thin layer deposition, but access or something to the marsh. And he's given up working in Massachusetts because you can talk all you want, they won't allow it. So,
Well, you
Just-
mentioned, they've done it in the beginning, that they allow it in Rhode Island, so do we know what their experiences have been, how, what it costs, how thick do they cover these marshes with, over what period of time, and is it in fact doing what it's supposed to do?
The URI participates in a lot of that stuff, and they have a good coastal program. And they've done a lot of that. They also combine they prep the marsh by creating these runnels, which are they're not like mosquito ditches, which dug through the marsh. So these are much shallower, and they frequently connect, you know, the pans in the marsh, ball spots in the marsh. So they generally connect those so that they don't have standing water in them. And then they put down the deposition, so the deposition comes down onto a marsh that's prepped to be free draining and everything. And they've done quite a few projects. I've watched a couple of presentations on them. It's work, but URI and, I forget what they have a coastal resource management program or something of that nature, and I think all of those research projects have been run through that agency. I actually have their name and the contact. I'll send that to you.
Well, historically, these marshes may have had those drainage ditches,
Yep.
which because they were,
Farms,
they needed to drain them in order to harvest the salt marsh
Yep.
hay.
exactly.
Right, and the mosquito ditch people have, I guess, a permanent okay to go on the marsh and clear out those ditches, even though
Yeah.
today they're causing some problems because the sides, because the ditches are so big, the sides are just sloughing off like they are on the edges of the marsh. So, but they did a runnel experiment, I think, in Ellen's Pond recently with Buzzards Bay. But they say you can't do runnel experiments on island marshes, only if they're connected with the land. And not they, I think the people that did the.
Yeah, the coalition does Runnels experiments, and
Right.
they use the mosquito permits, actually,
Right.
to
be able to
to
do
get
it.
the permits.
Right, because they're approved, so.
Yeah.
So, it would be great if we can get some information about
Rhode Island.
what their experience is, and also perhaps Chesapeake Bay. And the issue with marshes is that there's probably dozens of reasons why they're not healthy. But if you wait until you try to figure out what's happening with each individual marsh, some of it could be too much nitrogen, some of it could be invasive crabs, some of it could be, who knows, what people dump in the water, it could be boats going by. No matter what those problems are, if you don't raise the level of the marsh, they're gonna drown anyway. So I think that it's the only hope to save some of our marshes is to try to figure out how to do that. So I'll get off my soapbox. Anything else for long-term, short-term planning?
You want a motion to adjourn?
Yes, please.
Move we adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.